Canada and the United States were committed to, first and foremost, fundamental freedoms and human rights. Now it has become an ideology of human rights, where human rights triumph, have a priority, and become the new standards for justice. The rule of law has taken secondary position, and it's now in the name of human rights that we begin to impose all kinds of agendas, even on private institutions like churches and Christian colleges, universities. They have to begin to promote this new agenda in order to qualify for student aid or federal assistance in international development or for international development organizations. So I see that not only is it a very totalitarian agenda, but it becomes also very intolerant. It begins to impose its non-Christian, unchristian, anti-Christian values on the Christian communities. For example, in Africa, many nations in Africa have Christian leaders, and they still want to maintain their independence and their own agenda in terms of family and marriage, and they resist imposing a same-sex agenda. And yet the Organization of African Unity, through the United Nations, posing it on the Organization of African Unity, they in turn want to impose it on the individual nation of Africa. Through the back door, in other words, they're imposing their agenda. And you see it in Europe too, that nations like Hungary and Poland may still want to maintain a certain Christian foundation to their nations. They're not opposed to immigration. They're not opposed to migration of people. They just want to maintain their own identity as a Christian nation in terms of the rule of law, in terms of welcoming refugees who are Christian refugees, but that is being, resisted by and imposed by the European Union, which is imposing legal penalties on on Hungary and Poland. And so I saw this all coming, the developing from an international world, international relations, to much more of a global order, with a global governance imposing this new agenda, what I call a new spirit of democratism, in the name of peoples and concern for the planet, the human security rather than international security of peoples and nations. So, and I'm astonished that what I wrote and taught in the 1980s and wrote about in 1992, that I'm seeing it being implemented in 2017, 18, let alone by 2020. So I'm very concerned about the future of Canada, of course, the United States, losing that Christian identity. I'm concerned about what's happening in Europe in terms of Hungary and Poland, but more specifically in Africa, which is such a beautiful continent where the majority of people are Christians, and yet through this agenda, global agenda, these nation states are deprived of their own culture, their own values, if you will. I'm a champion of democracy, I'm a champion of liberal parliamentary democracy, but the agenda of democratism is a dangerous totalitarian tendency, in which I talk about the value of democracy, but not necessarily democratic values, because it begins to undermine the Christian values.
Participatory democracy?
Yeah, very good. It's also, an emphasis on doing away with representative democracy, parliamentary democracy, which is usually representative democracy, and bypassing that and involve much more participation of the NGOs. That's why it's called global governance, not global government, because it would only involve international governments. But the agenda is to really implement global governance, where you begin to involve the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, in the governance. In other words, you co-opt them. Yeah. You begin to deny their independence.
And they just participate.
Yeah, but they also participate not just in having input, but also in the actual governance. But they lose their independence.
Right.
Just like nation states begin to lose their independence, World Vision or Samaritan Purse will begin to lose their own independence.
Yeah, they can speak, but they cannot implement and say, you do this.
Correct. Very good. They are, they have to implement the global agenda rather than their own Christian agenda. So, yeah. And I see this happen. I've been seeing this happening, developing for the last 30 years, and I'm very concerned. And I just hope and pray that Canada and the United States and other countries will still maintain their own Christian identity, yes, be, very mindful of the needs in the world, compassionate needs, refugees, welcome refugees. As a matter of fact, Canada, certainly the United States, needs more immigrants, you know, but we want immigrants rather than migrants who just come in illegally. So that's about the world moving from an international organization toward a global governance where the agenda is a new humanism, which is not Christian humanism. It's not a liberal humanism, but it's a very anti-liberal, because even liberal intellectuals in universities, they are just as much pressured or harassed or persecuted than, say, Christians who are teaching in the public universities. So that's about the book.
Mhm.